Hello, Banks Goodell third graders. This is Miss Sumners, and today we're going to talk about the standard 3NF2, which talks about fractions on a number line. So let's look at our objective for today. To be able to use a number line to help solve fraction problems. As we're going through this, we're going to be asking ourselves, how can I use a number line to help me solve fraction problems? Let's review a couple of vocabulary terms first before we get into number lines. Remember that a fraction is a number that names a part of a whole or a part of a set. It could be represented by a picture like this square or by the actual fraction. This square could represent 1/2 because 1/2 of the square is blue, 1/2 of the square is white. Now let's talk about naming the parts of a fraction. The top number in the fraction is the numerator. The bottom number in the fraction is the denominator. But what does that mean? Well, the numerator represents the number of parts. This is the number of parts that you are counting. Remember, that does not always mean the number of parts that are shaded. It might mean the number of parts that are not shaded. You have to carefully read the problem to know what it's asking you. The denominator represents the total number of parts that equal a whole. So the fraction 3/4 could be represented in a picture with a shape that has 4 equal parts, and 3 of those parts are what you are counting. When we talk about one whole, we're talking about when the parts of a fraction are all there. We say it's one whole and it equals 1. In this circle, both parts are being represented. It's split into 2 equal-sized parts. They're both represented. So, when I have 2 1/2 pieces, that's equal to 1 whole. 2 halves equals 1 whole. Okay, so now let's talk about a number line. From the time you were in kindergarten or first grade, you've seen number lines and you've practiced counting on number lines. This number line is skipping a line between each number. So it's skip counting here. We have 0, 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14. A number line is a line divided into equal intervals or parts used to help math students see how numbers are related to each other. So we're going to talk more about these arrows that you can see at the bottom because it's going to be important for us to count these spaces. Sometimes I tell my students that we're counting the hops. How many hops we make from here to here is 1, 2. Notice 2 hops is represented by the number 2. 3, 4. It's represented by the number 4. And we could continue on till we get to 14. So now let's talk about when we are looking at fractions on a number line. A proper fraction is a fraction that we're going to find placed between the 0 and the 1. That's where our focus is today. So if we were to go back to the previous number line and we were to zoom in and just look at the space between the 0 and the 1, that's where we're going to find our fractions today. The intervals between 0 and 1 depend on the type of fraction that we're representing. So let's look. We've put some spaces here, some intervals. We need to count the number of spaces that we see between 0 and 1. So I'm going to start at my 0 and I'm going to go 1 hop over, 2 hops, 3 hops. So I can see that this line is divided into 3 equal spaces. Now I can represent those by fractions. This is 1 space out of 3 equal spaces. This is 2 spaces out of 3 equal spaces. So 0, 1/3, 2/3. This could be 3/3 or 1 whole. If you're working with fourths, then the lines need to divide the number line into 4 equal intervals. So let's count and make sure we have 4 equal size spaces here. 1, 2, 3, 4. Now I can name them with a fraction. 0/4, 1/4, 2/4, 3/4, 1 whole, or 4/4. Okay, let's look at one more. Splitting this into sixths. We're going to count our spaces. 1/6, 2/6, 3/6, 4/6, 5/6. And as we've said, the 1 whole could also be represented by 6/6. All right, boys and girls, I hope this helps you to better understand fractions on a number line. Make sure that you are not counting the number of lines, you are counting the number of hops or the number of spaces that are represented between the 0 and the 1 on the number line. 1 space, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So this line is divided into 6.